Welcome to Whole Team Eats Podcast, a 24/8 media production. Ever wonder who trains your favorite athlete? Join Tim Miller as he takes a look at the behind-the-scenes training of professional and collegiate athletes. Tim connects with trainers, athletes, and others in the sports community to share their stories. This podcast is dedicated to highlighting the work of athletes and trainers to inspire action and build community.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to an all-new episode of Whole Team Eats Podcast. This is Season 3, Episode 5. I'm your host, Tim Miller, and on this show, I sit down with former NFL running back Albert Young. Growing up in Morristown, Albert reflects on what it was like to have a community that showed him support from a young age. He was a highly touted athlete, and by the time his high school career was over, he held the rushing record in South Jersey. Albert describes what the recruiting process was like for him and how things have changed with NIL. On the show, we discuss Albert's current role as a coach and how he uses his experiences to mentor his players. He believes that the mental aspect of football and sports is something that youth athletes should focus on in addition to their physical training. Albert talks about the evolution of training and how some things over the past 2 decades have also remained the same. In the past few years, Albert has coached all levels of football, including high school, college, and has spent time with both the Chiefs and the Commanders in the NFL. It is my pleasure to introduce Albert Young, former NFL running back, to the show. Albert, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we've been trying to set this one up for a long time, being that we're both from the same town growing up and played football for the same high school, Moorestown High School in South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. So we'll dive into that a little bit later in the show. But first, I just want to start off and kind of to recap now that we're in 2024. Talk about your time in 2023. We saw that you're working, and we can tell by your shirt, you're with the Commanders during the off season and leading up to the season with an internship role. Can you talk about what that was like and what exactly you were doing with the running backs?
Oh, yeah. The NFL has an internship program every year where teams select coaches on the outside and bring them in to get that experience. And this year was my second go-round with the Commanders. Last year I did it with the Chiefs. So essentially coming in, working with the running backs and special teams. And in this particular situation, new offense coming in to Washington, an offense which I played in and coached in the past. So also being a bridge for the players and coaches who the system was newer for them as well, to help them out and give them little tips and tricks to learn the system quicker.
Yeah. And, just judging from what we saw on social media and everything that you kind of put out there, but you obviously were an NFL running back for a number of years and you spent time building those bonds and that camaraderie in the locker room with a bunch of the guys. What was it like to be back in the NFL setting the last couple of years with the Chiefs and the Commanders? And I saw a couple posts, even without not just the running backs, but I see like Jonathan Allen, who's a defensive tackle. What was it like building the bonds with those NFL guys and kind of sharing the wisdom that you've learned along your journey with them?
Man, that's my environment. So it was like going back home and being able to be around the younger players. And you mentioned John Allen, who's fantastic. He had an event at his house and being able to, help them out in their careers and give them advice and coach them up on things they might not have seen or heard before. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And you were with the Chiefs the year prior, and was it Wilkes University that you're with before that as well?
Yes. So had the same internship with the Chiefs the year prior. Before that, I was the running backs coach at Wilkes University in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. D3 program, was able to work with tremendous guys and players and great group of people there.
Yeah, and obviously you're dealing with high-level athletes in all three scenarios, but it's
Mhm.
obviously a jump from D3 college athletes to two NFL programs. What is the difference like in mentoring those players, or do you see mentorship as somewhat similar across all levels?
That doesn't change the mentorship. That's the same. The D3 experience was probably one of the best things for me because at that level, you're truly more than a coach. You're involved with the academic part, study halls, and um, I would say the mentorship is the same. The obviously higher you get when you get to the NFL, is the best athletes, but people are people. Um, some guys are just, you know, gifted by God with certain athletic ability. So the coaching doesn't change, but to experience that, it's broader than your range. I was fortunate to go from D3. I laugh about this with people. I get to go from D3, which is no slight because we had guys on that team get straight up ball. Guys that were D2, D1 calibers. Just the way recruiting is, you know, there's no shame in that at all. But to be able to go from Wilkes to go to the Super Bowl champion Chiefs, then come back home to um, Weehawken High School to coach, which is literally the smallest Group 1 in New Jersey. And then to be able to go to the Commanders, which is a building NFL organization trying to get to the level of the Chiefs. So I was able to experience and get a lot of information and just expanding that bag, dealing with different type of levels of players, different type of environment. So these past 2 years got
A lot of good experience, it
oh,
sounds like, right? And you've seen players at all levels at this point, from not only your playing time, but also from the coaching side now. And we've seen a lot of players become coaches and trainers, and our podcast primarily focuses on trainers and athletes. So the coaching aspect is a new aspect for some of our listeners, which we're very excited to hear more about. But I want to take a step back before we really dive into everything else, and just talk about your background. So as I mentioned, me and you actually, I was super excited for this episode because we both grew up in Morristown. We played for the same high school, and I actually have my Morristown football high school sweatshirt on here. But for those who don't know, and obviously people in our area know, that you were one of, I'd have to say it, you were one of, if not the best running backs to come through not just Morristown, but all of South Jersey. So you had the South Jersey rushing record for a number of years. I
Mhm.
know we were talking before the show, and you said that just got broken, I believe, right? But that's why it's a record, right? Records are meant to be broken, but you held it very proudly for a long time in South Jersey. So can you talk about what it was like growing up in Morristown, what it was like playing in Morristown, training, everything like that, and then eventually moving on to Iowa, where you started at running back, and then eventually the NFL?
Oh man, Moorestown was great in a way where it's a community that's got it together. So, I grew up Section 8 in a town like Morristown. So once again, we're going from two different. I was able to experience. I had two different lives essentially in Morristown, but the resources and the mentors I was able to get in Morristown and played a pivotal role because I was obviously get there athletically, and the town really took me under their wing early to assure I was going to reach my goals, which at a young age everyone knew I wanted to play in the NFL, and they went out of their way to make sure I knew what I needed to do to prepare to get there academically, really. Which I tell people, which what a lot of towns don't do. It was eighth grade going into high school. They brought me to the administration building to meet with like the principal, football coaches, to go over NCAA guidelines. I'm in eighth grade, like, oh, I must be on my way because, at that age, they're like, come meet with a bunch of grown adults that have some influence. They're going to show you what you need to do. And I'm very grateful for that. Very grateful for that. My mom was great. And what she didn't understand about the process, she didn't hesitate to let others who were more, who were well versed in that to take over. And it all worked out good.
Yeah, and the rest is history, really. But can you tell our listeners what it was like in your playing time in Morristown, and eventually what it was like being recruited and then moving on to a big time college like Iowa? What was it like playing at Iowa? Can you talk about your time there?
Recruiting, I originally committed to Wisconsin, so I was highly recruited, at a high school, and go through the whole process. I decided to go to Iowa. Iowa, playing in that state is, you're truly like a pro in state. You really are, and they provided all the resources you needed to be successful. A lot like what I came from in Moorestown. Coach Ferentz, who's still there, I believe it's year 26. They had they trained us properly in Iowa. It was a grind. It was great to play big time football and in a true college town.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a lot of similarities between Morristown and Iowa. With Coach Ferentz, he's been there for so long, and he's been a, kind of just like a rock in that program for so long. And somebody who recruited you in the early 2000s is still there, coaching and recruiting, and obviously navigating NIL at this point. So the landscape in college sports has changed. How do you think it would have been different if NIL was around when you were an athlete?
Well, I do know they sold a bunch of number 21 jerseys, and I ain't see a cent. So that would have been different. I couldn't imagine playing at Iowa in that state with the opportunity to get NIL.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Because you were treated like a pro.
Yeah, essentially. And NIL, all for it. It's about time players. They get rewarded for their efforts, and college football is big business now. It's getting closer to the pros at this point. They need to, once they figure out how to, control it a little and not just have it be all over the place. Hopefully they work out something to where everybody's happy. And then, at the end of the day, the focus is always the work and playing ball and getting your education. So that's great for the athletes now. That's progress.
Yeah, I always wonder, like, does it distract current athletes away from what should be the focus, which is education and preparation and training and obviously, performing well in their respective sports? There's so many things thrown at these athletes.
That's true, but most of these places, I can only go for the guys are so busy. You're training, all time at a season, and then when you play at these programs, you're not going to get any more distracted than you are going to class. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because things like when you go into class all day, teachers, professors, they always talking about ball anyway, or the next game. So if that's not distracting you, NIL really shouldn't. And at the end of the day, if going to the NFL is the goal, it shouldn't matter. Maybe for the guys that are going to college for the wrong reasons and it's just for the bag. But the dudes that have that drive and no NFL or professional because they got so many leagues now, I don't think it should distract you. I mean, you'd rather have some money in your pocket than worrying about, whether you have enough to go buy dinner one night if you want,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you're right. There's so much going on, even in your era being in college, that it probably has not changed from a point of the players being busy, right?
Yep.
I wanted to also mention, so on one of the earlier seasons, it was actually, I think, season 2 of this podcast, we had one of our guests that we had on was Ricky Stanzi. And
Mhm.
Ricky Stanzi, for those who don't know, he was a quarterback who played at Iowa. You were a
Yep.
little bit older than Ricky, so I believe you were a senior when he was a freshman or sophomore.
Yes, yes. It was. I think it was the second year on campus, freshman, sophomore. Yeah.
Okay. And what was that? Did you have any connection with Ricky, or, because you're a running back and he's a quarterback, I'm sure you guys spent some time together. What was it like with Ricky and
Well,
just going and playing with him?
you're not surprised by the success he had. It was just a matter of when. I just happened to be on the older end. My senior year, we only had two seniors on offense, essentially. So um, Ricky was young at that time. It wasn't his time. Uh, the following season was his time, and Ricky's a great guy, man.
Yeah, it's a shame it wasn't 1 year closer together,
Yeah.
right? You guys could have been a great duo in the backfield and had a lot of success, but
Yeah.
it was great to see Ricky do his thing.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And what was it like now? So you're at Iowa, you graduate, and you're looking to play in the NFL, right? What was
Mhm.
that process like, moving through the college ranks and eventually moving into the NFL? To, for those people who don't know, being in a running back room that included Adrian Peterson.
Oh man. Well, I was an undrafted free agent, and I got a call from the Vikings. Eric Bieniemy, he was like, "Come on," and the room was we had some dogs in that room. Obviously, Adrian Chester Taylor doesn't get talked about enough. He starts on most teams if Adrian isn't there, and we had a great room. Nafai Hutahi, friend of mine, fullback, with EB being our running back coach. I got to see how a superstar works in Adrian Peterson, and I got to see how a technician in Chester Taylor, how he goes about his business. And then obviously, I wasn't no slouch myself, so we had a nice group in there, and we competed every day. Um, Great experience again.
Yeah, that's incredible to hear what it was like kind of on the inside working with those players, and
Mhm.
just being in that running back room, and obviously at the height of Adrian Peterson when he's the NFL MVP. Like, what is it like just being able to study from him on a daily basis? You hear about so many. A lot of quarterbacks get the headlines when they're working under Tom Brady or Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers. But what is it like being able to just be mentored by, you know, uh, Adrian Peterson on and off the field? And really what we're focused on here at 24/8 is the training aspect of things. So you were always super self-motivated from a training aspect, but what is it like to see a Hall of Fame player work? Is there any difference, or does he set the standard?
A lot of it goes into him also being gifted to be able to do a lot of stuff. So yes, his training regimen. Um, Adrian did everything 100 miles an hour. So when you come in, that's the standard. So obviously he's the first back up. He's the starter. So when you see him go out and go at the speed he does, you have no choice but to play at that level. And so much so, and then EB's standard, besides for him being a great coach, he played. So there was no room for, slacking in our room. And Adrian set that tone. I mean, we would have walkthroughs essentially we're wearing shells, no pads. Adrian's the only dude out there with shoulder pads on. And this is a walkthrough. And we're still running the inside run and all. Well, not a walkthrough. I don't want to say that. We just had shells on because in the league, even if it's shells, we go on full speed. But he's running with shoulder pads through the line still. And you ask why, and he says, "I'm getting ready for the game." And that's how serious he was about that and about taking care of his body and everything. So just that work ethic, which you come in with it anyway yourself, but then you'd be like, yeah, this dude, he's different. He's different.
Yeah, yeah, and he
That's a
definitely
superstar.
he definitely creates that standard, and I'm sure he helped, Chester Taylor and yourself kind of raise your level, just by being around him. But you
Hmm.
mentioned a good point, right? A coach in, Eric Bieniemy, who also played, right?
Hmm.
That's what I kind of see you as you're working with the Chiefs and the Commanders. And we forgot to mention you were with Eric Bieniemy twice, right? Because with him in Minnesota 3 times. Okay.
Colorado with him when I was done uh, playing. So that was my first coaching gig. I was offensive assistant, quality control at the University of Colorado. So EB brought me there as well. Yeah,
What do you think about the direction of Colorado right now?
awesome, man. It's awesome. Love
You
it.
would say you're a big Dion fan and what he's doing over there?
Yeah, he's shaking it up a little, and more of Colorado. Boulder's a great place, and they have a past way back, and finally to see that program get some energy more than anything, more of
Yeah.
there's only so many teams out there. You need some good teams out there, and Colorado, on a rise, and they just picked up Sap, got to meet Sap, got to know him out. He came out with the Commanders. Those players are going to be different with Sap. I seen that with NFL players when Sap showed up for a few days. So I expect them to do well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Now, as a former player, do you think that you're better able to relate to players being a former player yourself? And do they see a difference in coaches? I've always thought that maybe there's a difference in a coach who can better connect during certain situations with a player with their former experience playing themselves. Does that help you in a way becoming a coach?
Absolutely, because I feel like coaching is progressive as well, and it's situational. So it gets better as more situations go on. You could be a great coach during training camp, but when we get into the grind of the season, knowing what those players go through, and specifically with the NFL guys, understanding the business. For running backs, most of us are late round draft picks or undrafted. So to be able to communicate with the players and tell them what they need to do so they can stay around, that's an instant connection that only a former player can do. It's like the coaching don't stop, the situations don't stop, the business side of football doesn't stop. So if you've never been there, if you've never been cut, you can't relate to somebody who's on the chopping block. So your demeanor is different when you're a former player. You're you're more empathetic to their situation, and they're not just a number. And you see that quite a bit from the ones who haven't, because at least in the NFL, this is your job, this is your business. Like, we're gonna have fun, we're gonna do that, but these are guys' careers, and coaches need to be sensitive towards that. And I believe that's what a former player brings to the table. You know, Obviously, just because you're a former player doesn't mean you're a good coach as well. But having that experience, the instant connection, it does come easier. And to answer your question,
Yeah, and I think you brought up a couple good points because the NFL season is it's a very physical sport, right? And it's a grind. Every professional sport is a grind, but football especially is a grind. So, we focus so much of what we do on the training aspect of things and physical preparation and dealing with injuries and overcoming those obstacles, everything from a physical training perspective. But the one thing that sticks out to me about players who played in the league and then return to coaching is you mentioned that you're empathetic towards those players being cut, and even in training camp you saw a lot of those running backs who didn't make the team or players who didn't make the team, and they're spending their whole summers training and working out and having those dreams and aspirations of making the league. So not only from a physical standpoint, but you're probably better able to connect with a lot of players and coach them from a mental aspect of here's where to expect, here's how to deal with your emotions, and the mental aspect is probably just as tough as the physical aspect, I would assume.
absolutely. I mean, no experience, just being in that situation, it's you know what you figure out what works and what doesn't. For instance, there's techniques and things to a lot of things, to how we play the game. But if you never done it up against somebody, you know which ones work. You almost bet. You know what doesn't work. That's what's almost better.
Yeah.
You could do what works, but I can tell you what doesn't work. And coaching different body types. There's different coaching for every body type. Well, at
Yeah.
least for running backs for me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I just think that you're very well rounded as a coach, and you can help a lot of young athletes, whether it's high school or college or professional level. You've got a resume that stands out, and you're one of the best players to ever come through South Jersey here, where we're from. So you have a lot of wisdom to share, and when we see that you keep doing that with all your programs at all different levels. But I want to take a quick pivot back to the training aspect of things. So you graduate high school in the early 2000s, probably in the mid 2000s, around was it 2010 that the collective bargaining agreement comes out, where you're a player who played in Minnesota. It's obviously not warm weather like a lot of places in Florida, Texas, California, Arizona, where we see all of these trainers spend a lot of time with their athletes, and a lot of private training facilities are popping up in the warmer weather locations. The CBA allowed those players to start training off-site with private trainers. How do you think training has evolved since your time as a player? Even as a high school athlete, like is the training is far more advanced at this point with the studies that have come out. But do you think it would have changed anything with your career? And then, where do you think training is going to go from here?
I had good trainers in high school or middle school. So I'm not going to. Sports science has advanced, which is fantastic. So over time that always gets better. And personally, in my opinion, I don't know how much it would have changed because I competed in Olympic weightlifting, so I had that background, and a lot of the things the guys are doing, we did that in college at Iowa. They were ahead of the game, so yes, it's progressed in a great way. But at the end of the day, athletes, if you motivated, you could do it. You get a lot of work in yourself. If you're that type of guy, you should be able to train 4 to 5 times a week on your own. You just need a little guidance. Nowadays, I'm talking about the youth and high school right now. I think the position training, I didn't have like a position coach, which I definitely think, that would have made me better. So the resources these kids have are, that's great. It's just all different philosophies. The sports science is better, but I think people sometimes get caught up in doing everything, perfect to the science. At some point, you got to go grind. At some point, it's going to hurt, you know. And conditioning is needed. Everybody's talking about, okay, that's fine. But did that guy play in a 4-quarter game before? All right. You almost need to bring conditioning days back because guys aren't doing enough of that because they don't have enough stamina to go 4 quarters. So yes, sports science is better, but it's an internal thing.
Yeah, that's super interesting to hear, right? And there's just a perception that as time goes on, sports science is obviously going to be better, but does it really? How much can it actually change? And if somebody like yourself is highly motivated from a young age, is it really going to cause a huge difference? I'm sure, if you train today, there'd be some difference, obviously, with the progression of sports science, but you're right. It's all about more on the individual level coming back and training on a daily basis and conditioning and all those things. I want to switch gears to youth athletes since you're working with some high school athletes currently. One, how has it been working with high school or youth athletes? And what is one word of advice you try to portray to those athletes from a young age? If it could be in relation to training or preparation or being consistent or even dealing with setbacks. Like, what is it like for you?
I believe you just said it. I think it's more of consistency. Um, in the microwave society, after, one session, everybody be like, how did I do? How did I do? It's like, it's just one session. Like, we got to keep stacking these, So everyone expects those immediate results. But um, the kids that do have those desires, they're always in DM, like asking for tips, pointers, things like that. Um, what I would say is find a program, find a solid coach, and stick to it and go hard and do work on your own. You know, do work on your own. Get your buddies together. Get some work together. Everything does, and I'm a trainer. This is me saying it. Everything doesn't have to be structured all the time. Meaning, like organized. Like it's okay for you and your boys to go to the field and get some work in on your own and push each other.
Yeah.
You know, uh, there's always work to do. There's always something you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's on the athlete to make sure they're doing the work, but part of your job is to motivate them. And as a trainer or a coach, your job is to motivate them and make sure that they have that guidance that, maybe you or I didn't have at some points in our youth careers. And we see that. And there is a lot of more hands-on training at this point that we see. At least, it's social media. So social media always makes everything look a little bit different. But obviously, there is a lot more focus on positional training, and we see that a lot with youth athletes,
That's
which is
great.
good.
Position training is great. That's something we didn't have. And it's also the same reason why these guys are held to a different standard coming into college, which can be unfair at times too, because everyone wants everything to be a finished product, and the transfer portal is accelerating that now. For these young players, they have to have a sense of urgency, because you're competing with the guys that are 2-3 years older than you.
Yeah. And it's the same thing not only with college, but even the professional level. As a rookie coming into the league, they expect rookies to hit the ground running and be, as close to a finished product, as they can be compared to maybe 10 years ago where running backs used to get a little bit more development and leeway when they came into the league. So we've seen that
Yep.
change from an NFL perspective.
Yeah, the rookies I've ran into though, those guys are coming in coached up well though. The rookies Chris Rodriguez of the Commanders. He's a great example. Been able to bond with him. He was well coached at Kentucky. Same thing, Pop Isaiah Pacheco with the Chiefs. Like, so these guys, you can see that their training, their personal training, when they come to the NFL, they're ready. But the NFL is also not like college, where the word development in the NFL is different than development in college. Development in the NFL is more held for your second round pick. Your third round pick, you better come ready, man.
Yeah, if you're a first round pick, you got to hit the ground running, right?
Yeah, you gotta go. Nah, I'm messing with you.
Yeah,
But
and as an undrafted free agent, you saw that side of things is you don't have a lot of room for error either, right? You're trying and fighting for your life to make the team.
man, that's where I had me ready. That's why where you go matters.
Yep.
Because when I went to Minnesota, it wasn't an adjustment for me really. It wasn't, not much.
Yeah. From a training aspect or like the style of offense, what was the
Just being an NFL player. Just being an NFL player. Whether it's the schedule, the regimen, the system, you're more of just changing terminology going in. They made us have a playbook. there's a lot of guys now in college, when they all look over to the sideline and coach tells them, they're the same guys that come to the NFL when they get a playbook this thick, don't know, it's just too much for them. So, guys got to come in ready.
Yeah. There are a lot of programs that are able to help their athletes come ready to hit the ground running, and Iowa is definitely one of them. And Coach Ferentz and his program, it sounds like kind of what a lot of high schools and colleges do from an educational standpoint is, they always prepare you for the next level, but how well do they do that? And it sounds like Morristown was a great stepping stone to Iowa, and then Iowa was a great stepping stone to the NFL. Just to wrap up here, I wanted to talk about everything, kind of we've talked about so far on the episode, and what are Albert Young's future plans? Like, where do you go from here? Coaching high school and college and NFL. You've done all three, but where do you see yourself? A year from now or a few years from now?
You know what I learned, man? You got, especially, obviously, I want to coach, or I am coaching high school ball in North Jersey. And if a college or pro opportunity comes up, it's definitely something I would, definitely consider seriously. And it's just being where my feet are right now, training, coaching, high school ball, and then see what happens. Just let the cards play out.
Yeah. And, we would love to see you back in the NFL ranks if that's what you want to do, right? You might like being in high school and college, but, whatever opportunity presents itself, I'm sure you'll have some good opportunities coming up in the next year, a couple years here. And, your resume speaks for itself. Absolutely. It's funny, early on the episode, you mentioned the Iowa selling those 21 jerseys. I didn't mention it, but I was actually one of those youth athletes who purchased a Albert Young 21 jersey.
Money, man.
Yeah, I know. My mom owes you a cut, right? But no, I was looking for that jersey prior to the episode, and it was years ago, so I don't know where it is at this point. But I wish I had it for the episode. But yeah, you're right. NIL has changed a lot of things. Training has changed. Everything from a transfer portal perspective has changed in college, and these athletes are coming in ready to the NFL. So it's good to hear where you were. It's good to hear where you are now, and we're looking forward to the future and what that holds for you. So once again, Albert Young, former NFL running back, it was great to have you on the podcast, Whole Team Eats podcast, and we'll make sure to follow you from here and let our listeners know what happens next. So once again, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tim.